The escape pod tumbled through space like a broken toy, its hull scarred by plasma burns and meteor impacts. Inside, 12-year-old Malik Johnson lay unconscious, his small body barely moving as the failing life support systems wheezed and sparked around him. He had been drifting for weeks, maybe months. Time meant nothing in the endless black between stars. Commander Draken's patrol ship detected the pod during a routine sweep of the outer rim. The massive dragon-like being studied his scanner readings with cold yellow eyes that had witnessed 1,000 worlds burn. His scaled fingers drummed against the command chair as he considered his options. Another piece of human debris, he hissed to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vex. Their pathetic planet was glassed months ago. Why do these vermin keep showing up in our space? Vex's forked tongue flicked out nervously. Sir, Imperial law requires us to process any survivors found in Draconian territory. The High Council demands strict adherence to protocol. Draken's claws scraped against metal as he clenched his fist. The Kethvar Empire had rules older than most civilizations, carved in stone when dragons first conquered the galaxy 10,000 years ago. Even he, a battle-scarred veteran of 50 campaigns, could not ignore Imperial decree. Bring it aboard, he growled. But keep it in quarantine. I will not have human filth contaminating my ship. The rescue operation took mere minutes. Dragon technology made short work of the damaged pod, cutting through its hull like paper. When they pulled Malik from the wreckage, he looked impossibly small and fragile. His dark skin was pale from malnutrition, his clothes torn and stained. But he was breathing. 3 days later, Malik woke up in a world beyond his wildest imagination. The medical bay around him gleamed with surfaces that seemed carved from pure crystal. Strange lights pulsed in patterns that hurt his eyes, and the air itself hummed with energy he could not understand. When he tried to sit up, every muscle in his body screamed in protest. So the little human finally awakens. The voice rumbled like distant thunder, making the walls themselves vibrate. Malik turned his head and nearly fainted from shock. High Magistrate Vorthak stood at the foot of his bed like something from ancient nightmares. The dragon's body stretched 15 feet from snout to tail, covered in scales that shifted color from deep purple to silver as he moved. His wings, folded against his back, could have wrapped around a small building. But it was his eyes that terrified Malik most, ancient, intelligent, and completely without mercy. Do you know where you are, little creature? Vorthak asked, his massive head tilting with predatory curiosity. Malik's voice came out as a whisper. No, sir. You are on Thala Prime, heart of the Kethvar Empire. Home to the dragon court that has ruled this galaxy since before your species learned to make fire. Vorthak's lips pulled back to reveal teeth like ivory daggers. You are now a ward of the Imperial Court. Your life belongs to us. The dragon began to pace, each footstep shaking the floor. Your kind fascinates me, human. So weak, so short-lived, yet you somehow managed to crawl from your mudball planet and reach for the stars. Most impressive for such primitive beings. Malik found his courage slowly returning. His grandmother had always told him to look bullies in the eye, even when they scared him. What happened to Earth? To my family? Vorthak's expression never changed. Your world chose poorly in the great conflicts. It was sterilized, as an example to others who might defy dragon authority. You and a handful of refugees are all that remain of humanity. The words hit Malik like physical blows. His parents, his little sister Keisha, his friends from school, all gone. Turned to ash and memory by beings who viewed human life as nothing more than an inconvenience. Why am I here? Malik asked, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Because our laws demand it. Any living being found in our space becomes property of the Empire. You will be educated, trained, and put to whatever use we deem appropriate. Vorthak leaned closer, his hot breath washing over Malik like a furnace wind. You will serve as a curiosity for the noble houses, little human. A pet to amuse our younglings and remind them of their superiority. Try not to disappoint us too quickly. As the great dragon swept from the room, Malik stared up at the crystal ceiling and made a promise to himself. He would survive this place. He would learn everything they could teach him. And someday, somehow, he would make them pay for what they had done to his world. He was just a 12-year-old boy, alone among monsters. But he was human, and humans had always been survivors. 5 years passed like a blur of crystal corridors and towering shadows. Malik had grown from a terrified child into a young man who walked the dragon court with quiet confidence. His dark skin had gained a healthy glow from the strange artificial suns of Thala Prime, and his eyes held depths that surprised even the ancient dragons who watched him. The other human refugees who had trickled into the empire over the years struggled just to survive. They worked in the lowest positions, cleaning scales and polishing crystal, grateful for scraps from dragon tables. But Malik was different. While they cowered, he studied. While they accepted their fate, he planned for something greater. Impossible, whispered Lady Nithara as she reviewed the mathematical proofs spread across her ornate desk. The dragon noble's silver scales rippled with agitation as she read Malik's work for the third time. He had solved the trade route paradox in a single afternoon, a problem that had puzzled her house's best economists for decades. Malik stood respectfully before her massive form, but his posture showed no fear. The solution becomes clear when you consider human economic theory, my lady. Dragons approach trade as conquest, seeking to dominate every transaction. But what if cooperation generated more wealth than competition? The young woman dragon's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare suggest that dragon methods are flawed? I suggest that different approaches might yield different results, Malik replied carefully. He had learned to navigate dragon pride like walking through a minefield. Your ways have brought great success. Perhaps human methods could complement them. Ancient Magistrate Korath watched this exchange from the shadows, his massive frame hidden behind a pillar of living crystal. The old dragon had ruled for 3,000 years, and in all that time, no lesser species had ever challenged dragon thinking so elegantly. This human boy didn't attack their beliefs, he simply offered alternatives that worked better. In the court's great library, Malik had become a familiar sight. While young dragons memorized ancient texts and recited traditional wisdom, he devoured knowledge from every source he could find. He learned 17 different alien languages, mastered stellar navigation techniques that dragons considered beneath their notice, and absorbed military histories from 100 conquered worlds. The human spends too much time reading, complained Prince Zaleth during a court session. The golden-scaled dragon was barely older than Malik in human years, but his royal bloodline made him technically superior to everyone except the emperor himself. It seeks knowledge above its station. Knowledge belongs to those who can grasp it, replied Korath mildly. The boy shows remarkable aptitude. Aptitude? Zaleth's voice rose to a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. It is a human. A creature whose ancestors were throwing sticks at wild animals while our forefathers conquered galaxies. Its very existence in this court insults our noble heritage. But Korath had seen something in Malik that the younger dragons missed. The human boy didn't just memorize facts, he connected them in ways that revealed patterns invisible to dragon minds. Last week, Malik had suggested modifications to their faster-than-light communication systems that improved efficiency by 40%. The month before, he had solved a diplomatic crisis with the Centauri Federation by proposing a trade agreement that satisfied both species' cultural needs. The real test came when Lady Nithara's trade empire began failing. Her house controlled shipping routes between 17 star systems, but profits had been declining for years. Rival dragon houses were slowly choking her business to death through political maneuvering and economic warfare. I could redesign your entire operation, Malik offered during one of their private meetings. But you would need to trust me completely. Nithara's laugh came out as a harsh bark. Trust a human with my family's fortune? You must think me mad. I think you're desperate, Malik said simply. Your current approach is failing. Within 6 months, House Nithara will be bankrupt. You need something your enemies cannot predict or counter. The dragon noble stared at him for a long moment, her ancient mind calculating risks and possibilities. Finally, she nodded. Show me. What Malik proposed shocked her to the core. Instead of fighting other dragon houses directly, he suggested partnering with smaller alien species that dragons typically ignored. Rather than using traditional dragon intimidation tactics, he recommended building relationships based on mutual benefit. His plan involved treating business partners as equals rather than subjects. This is not how dragons conduct business, Nithara protested. Exactly, Malik replied with a slight smile. That's why it will work. Within 3 months, House Nithara's profits had doubled. Within 6, they controlled new trade routes that other dragons hadn't even considered valuable. Malik's human perspective had revealed opportunities that dragon arrogance had blinded them to for centuries. Word of the human's success spread through the court like wildfire. Some dragons began seeking his advice secretly, ashamed to admit they needed help from a lesser species. Others grew more hostile, viewing his achievements as personal attacks on dragon superiority. But Malik simply continued learning, growing stronger and wiser with each passing day. He was no longer the terrified boy who had awakened in a crystal room 5 years ago. He was becoming something the dragons had never seen before, a human who could match their intellect and surpass their imagination. The game was changing, and Malik intended to win. The crystal bell that announced imperial decrees rang across Thala Prime with a sound like breaking stars. Every being in the Dragon Court froze as Emperor Zorthak's ancient voice echoed through the palace halls. Malik felt his heart skip a beat as the words reached his ears. I am old, even by dragon standards, the Emperor's voice rumbled with the weight of 10,000 years. The time has come for me to join my ancestors in the eternal flame. The trials of succession will begin at the next full moon. The great throne room exploded into chaos. Dragons roared, aliens whispered, and the very walls seemed to shake with excitement and fear. The trials of succession happen maybe once every 1,000 years. Most beings would never witness such an event in their lifetimes. Malik watched from his usual spot near the back of the hall as the 5 great dragon houses began their political maneuvering. House Drakmar with their blood-red scales and violent reputation. House Nethys with their silver brilliance and mastery of technology. House Vorthak with their ancient wisdom and purple majesty. House Korath with their diplomatic cunning and green gold beauty. And House Zaleth with their royal golden scales and claims to the purest bloodline. Each house would present their finest champion for the trials. Tests of wisdom, strength, and leadership that would determine who wore the obsidian crown and ruled the galaxy for the next millennium. It was the most important event in dragon civilization. The ancient laws are clear, Emperor Zorthak continued, his massive form casting shadows across the assembled court. Any being raised within the imperial court may present themselves as a candidate for succession. The trials will test mind, body, and spirit. Only the worthy shall claim the throne. That last part was just tradition. Everyone knew only dragons could possibly pass the trials. The very idea of another species ruling the Kethvar Empire was laughable. Dragons had conquered the galaxy through superior intelligence, overwhelming strength, and natural leadership abilities. No lesser being could match them. Malik felt something stirring in his chest as he listened to the Emperor's words. A dangerous idea began forming in his mind, growing stronger with each heartbeat. He thought of his destroyed homeworld, of the casual cruelty with which dragons treated other species, of the potential he saw being wasted across the empire. The formal presentations began 3 days later. Each dragon house brought their champions forward with great ceremony. Prince Zaleth stepped forward for his own house, his golden scales polished to mirror brightness. His wings spread wide as he declared his noble bloodline and superior breeding. Lady Nithara presented her cousin Draken, a warrior scholar whose silver scales bore the scars of 100 battles. House Vorthak brought forward their eldest son, whose purple hide gleamed with ancient wisdom. The other houses followed with their own magnificent candidates. The crowd began to disperse, assuming the presentations were finished. But then a quiet voice spoke from the back of the hall. I claim the ancient right of succession. The words cut through the noise like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward the speaker. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the Emperor leaned forward on his massive throne to see who had spoken. Malik Johnson stepped into the center of the hall. At 17, he stood barely 6 feet tall in a room full of beings that towered above him like living mountains. His simple court robes looked plain next to the elaborate ceremonial armor of the dragon champions. But his voice carried clearly through the sudden silence. I am Malik Johnson, ward of the Imperial Court for 5 years. I formally request to participate in the trials of succession. The silence stretched for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then the hall erupted in the loudest roar Malik had ever heard. Dragons bellowed with laughter and rage. Aliens chittered in shock and disbelief. The sound was so overwhelming that crystal fixtures began cracking from the vibration. Preposterous. Prince Zaleth's voice cut above the chaos like a sword. This is an insult to every noble bloodline in the Empire. A human? A creature whose entire species was wiped out like insects dares to claim equality with dragons. The law stands absolute, came a calm voice from the side of the hall. Ancient Magistrate Korath stepped forward, his massive form radiating authority. Any being raised within the Imperial Court may seek the crown. The human has that right. Rights? Lady Nithara's laugh was like breaking glass. What rights do pets have? This creature exists only because we allow it. It breathes by our permission. But Emperor Zorthak raised one massive claw, and instant silence fell over the hall. His ancient eyes studied Malik with an expression that gave nothing away. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The law was written by my ancestors and sealed in dragon blood. It cannot be changed or ignored, even by me. The Emperor's gaze never left Malik's face. If the human wishes to face the trials, he may do so. When he fails and dies, perhaps it will serve as entertainment for the court. Malik felt every eye in the hall focused on him. Dragons stared with mixtures of amusement, disgust, and curiosity. He knew that most of them expected him to back down, to apologize for his presumption and return to his place in the shadows. Instead, he bowed formally to the emperor. I accept the terms and conditions of the trials of succession. I will face whatever tests await. The die was cast. In 3 days, the trials would begin, and Malik would either prove that humans deserved respect in this galaxy, or die trying. Either way, he would never back down again. The first trial began at dawn with the test of wisdom. 5 crystalline pedestals rose from the marble floor of the ancient testing chamber, each one humming with energy that made the air itself shimmer. The dragon champions took their positions with confident grace, their scales catching the morning light like living jewels. Malik walked to his pedestal feeling like a mouse among lions. The other competitors barely acknowledged his presence. Prince Zaleth actually laughed when he saw the human approaching, his golden scales rippling with amusement. The entertainment begins early today, Zaleth whispered to his cousin. Watch the little pet struggle with problems beyond its simple mind. The test of wisdom was legendary throughout the empire. Ancient puzzles that had challenged dragon intellects for thousands of years, mathematical concepts that required centuries of study to master, philosophical questions that had no clear answers. Each candidate would face the same challenges, but their approaches would reveal everything about their fitness to rule. When the first problem appeared as a hologram above the pedestals, Malik felt his stomach drop. The paradox of infinite stars, a theoretical question about managing resources across an endless galaxy. Dragon scholars had debated this problem for 3 millennia without reaching a satisfactory solution. The dragon champions began their responses in the traditional way, citing ancient texts and building upon established theories. Their answers were eloquent, learned, and completely predictable. Malik listened to their reasoning and realized they were all making the same fundamental mistake. They were thinking like dragons. When his turn came, Malik approached the problem differently. The paradox assumes that infinite resources require infinite management, he said simply. But what if the solution isn't managing everything, but creating systems that manage themselves? He proposed a network of autonomous regions, each governing itself according to local needs while contributing to the greater whole. Instead of one supreme ruler trying to control everything, power would be distributed and balanced. The dragons had always seen leadership as domination, but humans understood cooperation. The testing chamber fell silent as Malik's solution played out in the hologram. His approach actually worked. After 3,000 years of debate, a 17-year-old human had solved the paradox of infinite stars in 15 minutes. Ancient Magistrate Koratha's eyes widened as he studied the results. Remarkable. The human has found an entirely new approach to galactic governance. Prince Zalatha's golden scales darkened with rage. Impossible. He must have cheated somehow. But the evidence was clear. Malik had passed the test of wisdom, and his solution would be studied for generations to come. The trials continued over the following weeks. Each test revealed more of Malik's unusual abilities. In the trial of leadership, he was given command of a rebellious alien colony that had resisted dragon rule for decades. While the other champions prepared military campaigns and threat displays, Malik did something unprecedented: he listened. The colony's grievances were simple. They wanted fair treatment, representation in government, and respect for their cultural traditions. Previous dragon administrators had dismissed these concerns as the whining of inferior beings. Malik saw them as reasonable requests from fellow citizens of the empire. Within days, he had negotiated a peaceful settlement that gave the colonists autonomy while maintaining their loyalty to the empire. The dragons were stunned. Violence had always been their preferred solution to rebellion. "The human makes it look easy," whispered Lady Nithara to her advisors. "How does he succeed where we have failed for centuries?" The answer was becoming clear to those paying attention. Malik didn't see other species as subjects to be controlled. He saw them as partners to be respected. This fundamental difference in perspective gave him advantages that pure dragon thinking could never match. But success bred desperation among the dragon houses. They had expected the human to fail quickly and dramatically. Instead, he was outperforming their champions at every turn. The unthinkable was becoming possible: a human might actually win the trials of succession. The real panic began when rumors started spreading through the court. Alien species throughout the empire were following the trials with intense interest. For the first time in their history, they saw someone like them competing as an equal with dragons. Malik was becoming a symbol of hope for billions of oppressed beings. Prince Zaleth called a secret meeting of the dragon houses in the depths of the palace. "This cannot be allowed to continue," he hissed to the assembled nobles. "If the human wins, it will shatter everything we have built. Our subjects will see dragons as fallible. Our authority will crumble." "What do you propose?" asked Lady Nythara, her silver scales dim with worry. "Whatever it takes," Zaleth replied coldly. "Sabotage, politics, even assassination if necessary. The human must not reach the final trial." They tried everything. Malik's quarters were searched for evidence of cheating. His food was tested for intelligence-enhancing drugs. Assassins struck twice in dark corridors, only to find that human reflexes and paranoia made for difficult targets. But their efforts failed because they misunderstood their enemy. Malik wasn't succeeding through dragon strengths like raw intelligence or physical power. He was winning through human abilities that dragons had never developed: adaptability, creativity, and the capacity to unite different groups toward common goals. The penultimate trial arrived like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The War Games, a test of military leadership using the Empire's actual fleets in massive simulated battles. This was where dragons expected to finally crush the human upstart. They were about to learn why humans had survived their violent evolutionary history while so many other species had gone extinct. The game was changing, and Malik held cards that dragons didn't even know existed. The War Games began with a spectacle that shook the very foundations of Thala Prime. Massive holographic displays filled the sky above the capital, showing 5 separate fleets preparing for the ultimate test of military leadership. Each dragon champion commanded 1,000 ships, their crews drawn from the elite forces of the Kethvar Empire. Malik stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical displays with calm intensity. His fleet was the smallest by design. The trial masters had given him older ships with less experienced crews, expecting him to fail quickly. The dragon champions commanded sleek new vessels with veteran officers who had conquered dozens of worlds. "Look at the humans' pathetic force," Prince Zaleth laughed as he reviewed his own magnificent fleet. "Outdated cruisers and untested pilots. This will be over in minutes." The simulation began with traditional dragon warfare, massive formations clashing in direct combat, superior firepower deciding the outcome through brute force. The dragon champions deployed their fleets exactly as their ancestors had for 10,000 years. Overwhelming strength, honorable battle lines, victory through domination. Malik's fleet simply vanished. Where did they go? Lady Nythara demanded as her sensors lost track of the human ships. One moment they were there, the next they had scattered like leaves in a hurricane. What the dragons didn't understand was that humans had learned warfare in a very different school. Earth had been a violent world where the weak survived by being clever, not strong. While dragons had conquered through superior technology and overwhelming force, humans had survived through guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, and the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. Malik's ships struck like ghosts. They appeared behind enemy formations, hit critical targets, and disappeared before the dragons could respond. His pilots used asteroid fields and cosmic debris as cover, turning the battlefield environment into a weapon. When dragon fleets tried to corner them, they found themselves fighting shadows. "This is not honorable combat." Prince Zaleth roared as his flagship shuddered under surprise attacks from 3 directions. "The human fights like a coward." But Emperor Zorthak watched the displays with growing fascination. The boy fights like someone who has never had the luxury of superior strength. He uses what he has instead of lamenting what he lacks. Malik's fleet began picking apart the dragon forces piece by piece. He targeted supply ships, disrupted communication networks, and turned the dragon's own size against them. His smaller, more maneuverable vessels danced between the massive dragon dreadnoughts, striking vital systems and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. The psychological impact was devastating. Dragon crews who had never faced an enemy they couldn't overwhelm began making mistakes. Their formations broke apart as commanders tried to counter threats that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Panic spread through their ranks like a virus. Within 6 hours, Malik's tiny fleet had destroyed or disabled 4 times their number. The dragon champions stared at their displays in stunned disbelief as their supposedly invincible forces crumbled before human ingenuity. "Impossible," whispered Lady Nythara as her last remaining ship surrendered. "How can inferior technology defeat dragon supremacy?" The answer was becoming clear to everyone watching. Technology was only as good as the mind using it. Malik's human perspective had revealed weaknesses in dragon thinking that they never knew existed. But the war games were only preparation for the final trial. As tradition demanded, the last candidate standing would face champion Gorvak the Deathbringer in single combat. The massive black-scaled dragon had served as the Empire's ultimate warrior for over a century. His claws had torn through alien armor, his flames had melted starship hulls, and his strength could crush stone to powder. Malik looked up at the 20-foot monster and knew that physical combat meant certain death. Gorvak's smallest finger was thicker than Malik's arm. The dragon's breath could melt steel, and his hide could turn aside plasma weapons. But as the final trial began, Malik did something that shocked the entire court. Instead of drawing a weapon or preparing for battle, he knelt on the crystal floor and spoke in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast arena. I invoke the ancient trial of truth. Let this contest be decided not by strength of body, but by strength of purpose. The crowd erupted in confusion. The trial of truth was an almost forgotten legal procedure, buried deep in the Empire's oldest laws. It allowed a candidate to challenge the very foundations of imperial rule instead of simply fighting for the crown. Emperor Zorthak's ancient eyes narrowed as he considered the human's request. The law was clear, though it had not been invoked for over 2,000 years. Speak then, human. Let the court hear your truth. Malik rose to his feet and faced the assembled dragons with quiet dignity. 10,000 years of dragon rule have brought order to the galaxy, but also stagnation. You have conquered through fear and maintained power through the belief that might makes right. But fear creates resentment, not loyalty. Strength without wisdom leads to collapse. He gestured to the holographic displays still showing the results of the war games. Today you saw what happens when different thinking challenges established methods. My human perspective revealed flaws in dragon military doctrine because I approached problems differently than you ever could. The court listened in stunned silence as Malik continued. The Empire faces threats you cannot see because you refuse to value what other species offer. Your assumption of superiority blinds you to innovation, growth, and the strength that comes from unity rather than domination. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, filled with passion that resonated through the crystal halls. I offer you a vision of the Kethva Empire renewed. Not through conquest and oppression, but through cooperation and mutual respect. Imagine fleets where dragon strength combines with human creativity, alien wisdom, and technologies you have never considered. Imagine worlds where different species contribute their unique gifts instead of simply obeying dragon commands. Ancient Magistrate Korath stepped forward, his massive form trembling with emotion. The human speaks truth that we have been too proud to acknowledge. Our empire has grown stagnant because we stopped learning from others. Emperor Zorthak studied Malik for a long moment, his ancient mind weighing words that challenged everything dragons had believed for millennia. Finally, he spoke in a voice that echoed through history. Wisdom comes from the most unexpected sources. I have ruled for 10,000 years, and in all that time, no one has shown me such clarity of vision. The Emperor's massive form rose from the throne. I name Malik Johnson heir to the Obsidian Crown and rightful ruler of the Kethvar Empire. As the ancient crown settled on Malik's head, he became the first non-dragon ruler in galactic history. The weight of it was almost crushing, but he stood straight and faced his new subjects with quiet confidence. Today begins a new age, he declared, his voice carrying to 1,000 worlds through imperial communication networks. An age where every species has value, where cooperation replaces conquest, and where the greatest strength comes not from domination, but from unity. Across the galaxy, billions of beings who had lived under dragon rule for generations heard those words and dared to hope. The human orphan who had arrived as a broken refugee had become their emperor, and his first promise was to build a better universe for everyone. The dragons had sought to rule the galaxy through fear and strength. Malik chose to lead it through wisdom and respect. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the future looked brighter than the past.